Morning, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. It was fitting that on Memorial Day weekend, I was reading a piece in The Atlantic about military strategy. And I found this was just absolutely fascinating because there were just so many metaphors in here that you could apply to retailing. So first, The Atlantic sets up the context. They point out, and the piece is by a guy named Elliot Ackerman, writes, on March 9th, 1862, the Union warship Monitor met its Confederate counterpart, Virginia. After a 4-hour exchange of fire, the two fought to a draw. It was the first battle of ironclads, and in one day, every wooden ship of the line of every naval power immediately became obsolete. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. If the Battle of Ironclad settled once and for all the wood versus iron debate, Japanese carrier-based aircraft settled the battleship versus carrier debate by sinking the cream of America's battleship fleet in a single morning. And then on April 14th, 2022, the Ukrainians sank the Russian cruiser Moskva with a pair of Neptune anti-ship missiles. And that success posed an urgent question to the world's major militaries. Has another age of warfare just begun? And the point of the article is, while it's not unanimous at all, is yes, another age of warfare has begun. The story goes on. In March 2020, the Marine Commandant, General David Berger, published Force Design 2030. This controversial paper announced a significant restructuring based on the belief that the, quote, Marine Corps is not organized, trained, equipped, or postured to meet the demands of the rapidly evolving future operating environment. The military we have, the article argues, an army built around tanks, a navy built around ships, and an air force built around planes, all of which are technologically advanced and astronomically expensive, is platform-centric. So far, in Ukraine, the signature land weapon hasn't been a tank, but an anti-tank missile, the Javelin. The signature air weapon hasn't been an aircraft, but an anti-air missile, the Stinger. And as the sinking of the Moskva showed, the signature maritime weapon hasn't been a ship, but an anti-ship missile, the Neptune. Like its Russian counterpart, the story goes on, the American military has long been built around platforms. To pivot away from a platform-centric view of warfare is both a cultural challenge. What does it mean to be a fighter pilot without a jet, or a tanker without a tank, or a sailor without a ship, and a resource challenge? And listen, in so many ways, this is the same as retail, right? If you've always been in the business of stores, what does it mean when suddenly the retail business goes away from stores? Part of a catchphrase that's taken place in the Marine Corps has been divest to invest. And the idea is get rid of the stuff you don't need so you can invest in the stuff you do. Now, the story points out that there are naysayers, and that the naysayers have some good points. It's not that these are old farts who just don't want to change. A retired general, Charles Krulak, says, you're divesting yourself of huge capability to buy capability that's still on the drawing boards. But Admiral James Stavridis, when I see him on TV, this guy just impresses me no end. He spent much of his 40-plus year Navy career in the South China Sea. He believes in Berger's vision. The Army of tomorrow, he says, will look like the Marine Corps of today. And what General Berger is doing is critical. And this is really, really fascinating stuff. It's Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts. He's a former Marine, Iraq War veteran. He sits on the House Armed Services Committee. And he says much of this comes down to the role that the Marine Corps has traditionally played as an incubator for new ideas as the smallest, nimblest of the services. Our country can afford to have the Marine Corps overinvested in a new type of warfare that never comes to pass. But what we cannot afford is to have the Marine Corps underinvested in a new type of warfare that does come to pass. I think it's fair to argue that, listen, there is a new kind of retailing taking place today, right? Now, in fits and starts, right? Pandemic launched it really, really fast. It's pulling back right now. we have inflation, we have potential of recession. There's a lot of mixed things going on. But to think that the enormous changes that took place in retail over the last 4 years, that somehow we're going to back up and go back to a completely store-centric model, I think is naive. I think the notion that stores, unless you're the big guys, the Amazons, which is pretty nimble, by the way, or Walmart or Target or Kroger or Albertsons, and unless you're those guys, then you've got to be like the Marine Corps, right? You're going to be smaller, but you've got to be nimbler. You've got to be investing in these new capabilities, because the fact of the matter is the rules of retail have changed, just like the rules of warfare are changing. And I think it is metaphorical, but I think really powerful when you realize how things have shifted. That platform-based warfare has been less successful for the Russians than the kind of guerrilla battles that have been fought by the Ukrainians. Now listen, is it a perfect metaphor? Absolutely not. There's a huge difference between warfare and retailing. But I think there are lessons to be learned. And I thought this is a fascinating piece in The Atlantic. I'll put a link to it down below if you want to read the whole thing. That is what's on my mind this morning. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.